This is a really good question. If we allow our leadership to just walk out and tell us reassuring lies, who then stands up and tells the truth, regardless of how it makes you feel? And if you're listening to the news or any source of information based on how it makes you feel, that should worry you, because it should cause you to think, not feel. There is a massive psychological operation being run on the American people about the story in Venezuela. No more can it be exemplified than here. This is the newly minted president of Colombia, hat in hand, before the international community, begging for money because poor Colombia can't afford this massive increase in immigration from Venezuelans fleeing the crisis. It's bizarro world in the extreme. Why do I say that? This country has been synonymous with, and the poster child for, literally every metric of corruption and crime you could think of. They themselves, by virtue of their policy and lack of action, have created the largest group of internally displaced refugees in this hemisphere, second now in the world only to the situation in Syria. 6.3 million Colombians every single day in a country of 40 million, just so that I can put this in context for you. 6.3 million Colombians live on the run in fear for their lives from the cartels. Most of which, over the last 20 to 30 years, have fled to Venezuela and have been the beneficiary of, that so evil socialism that fed people, educated people, and gave them homes. Now, when it comes time to return the favor, goes hat in hand, complaining and whining to the world, when still to this day, no matter what metric you want to use, you'll find the leader in criminality in this country. 90% of the drugs that come to the United States from Colombia, 2/3 of the world. And I love this map because it gives me an opportunity to speak to a group of people that I used to stand with, but no longer can tolerate. These wall people, I want you to use logic for just 1 second. If you have a bucket and you have a really big hole on one side of the bucket and 2 smaller holes on the other side of the bucket, and you decide to patch the bigger hole, what happens to the pressure of the water coming out the 2 smaller holes on the other side of the bucket? It increases in direct proportion to that amount of water. Building a wall is dumb, because what these arrows show is not the amount of drugs coming into the country. It shows the amount of drugs that we've been able to stop and find and can identify coming into the country. Admiral Kurt Tidd from the U.S. Navy even confirmed this for us. 75% of the drugs coming into the United States come in through the Gulf of Mexico, Florida, and the East Coast. The other 25% come in over here. And of the 25% over here, yes, we've already been able to stop the vast majority of them with things as they are. But this is where the real problem is, as a result of Colombia. Now, this is the PSYOP. We have standing executive orders from the last administration and the current administration that say that not Colombia, Venezuela is the existential emergency threat to the United States. The place where most Americans can't even name 2 cities. That's who we're going to give humanitarian aid to. It is bizarre. And it's one of the reasons I train psychological operations, because unless you can understand how to look at this thing with a clear head and put away all the noise, you won't understand any of the things that are to come. Because we're very close to midterm elections. And they are already cooking up the excuses for success and failure and how they're going to manipulate the story. And oh, by the way, this was no accident. What most people don't know is that Verizon has a good chunk of the network right down here. This was the U.S. military running trial runs for shutting down all cell communication in Venezuela prior to the invasion. Because that's what they do. They block anybody's ability to speak the truth. Or speak anything that counters the official narrative. And they have done it over and over and over again with anyone who chooses to stand up and say, no, leadership, you are lying, regardless of whether it was this administration, the administration before, or the one before that. So this is what's coming. And this is going to be the story. You mark my words. This is going to be the story that changes everything about the midterms. Because there's a story being run all over the mainstream media right now about the current guy trying to be confirmed for the Supreme Court and some allegation of things that have happened in his past. And then there's also a story about a beloved TV figure who recently just got sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison. Now, what do those two things have to do with each other and this? Well, what the story is going to be is this. Kavanaugh gets a seat on the Supreme Court, having been accused of a certain type of misconduct in his past. A white guy. Another guy, beloved TV figure, who was also accused of the exact same thing, goes to prison. Now, I know it's two issues that you shouldn't conflate. Two entirely different investigations, two entirely different sets of circumstances. I totally agree. But you have to remember, the media works in 30-second sound bites and tweets. And this will be an easy thing for the left to throw up. We are putting a black man in prison for the same thing this guy who gets a seat on the Supreme Court who's white is accused of. That's how it's going to play. And the only thing that's going to get that off of the mainstream media front page is when the U.S. decides to conduct humanitarian aid in Venezuela. And that's what's coming. It's not right. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm not saying that it's even relevant. And a year from now, no one will even know. Because that's how quickly our minds change. It's a different topic for a different day. But trust me when I tell you that there are things going on right now that are setting the stage for what will be seen historically as the beginning of World War III. Because there are people countries, I should say, that have a great deal of money invested in Venezuela and are not going to let the United States, especially in a very weak position right now around the world, stop the money flow out of there, the gold, the oil, and everything else. So we will leave it there. I know I covered a lot of topics today, but it's going to necessarily probably be that way. And if you would like to join us for $1 a month at the base level, at Patreon, we would love to have you. We conduct training 5 days a week here that covers topics that are usually too controversial for YouTube. So we've seen a great increase, and I appreciate it, but the more people that can understand the basis and the fundamental techniques used in psychological operations, the more we will be able to defeat the lies coming out of our media. Because the more people that can come out and say, look, this is the story and this is why it's a lie, the better chance we will have at some point in the future of regaining some semblance of decency in this country. So, thank you again. I very much appreciate you guys' support. Like, share, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Thank you.